At 10:17 on a bright Tuesday morning, Maahir Rahman watched the woman he had secretly loved for almost a year stand in the middle of a crowded downtown sidewalk with tears in her eyes, one hand gripping his sleeve like he was the last safe thing left in the world. The sun was too warm for a moment that cold. Cars moved past them. Coffee cups steamed in strangers' hands. Office workers rushed around like nobody's heart was breaking in plain sight. And Maahir, who had spent most of his life turning pain into jokes before it could hurt him, smiled weakly and said, "Careful, people will think we're dating." Saira then looked up at him, her lashes wet, her voice barely louder than the city noise around them, and whispered, "I hope they do. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet kind of love that changes a person's life, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Sometimes one small act of compassion becomes the beginning of everything." Maahir did not know what to say after that. For once, his humor failed him. He had a clever line ready for almost every uncomfortable situation, because jokes had protected him since childhood. When his father left, he joked that the house was quieter. When his mother worked double shifts, he joked that cereal counted as dinner. When his first serious relationship ended with betrayal, he joked that at least he could now sleep diagonally on the bed. But standing there with Saira holding his sleeve and admitting something he had only allowed himself to imagine in silence, Maahir could not laugh. He could only stare at her and feel every wall inside him begin to tremble. They had met 9 months earlier at a small community literacy center tucked between a bakery and a repair shop. Maahir volunteered there every Saturday morning, helping adults practice English, write resumes, and fill out job applications. He told people he did it because he had free time, but the truth was simpler and sadder. The center made him feel useful on weekends that otherwise felt empty. Saira arrived one sunny morning carrying a canvas bag full of donated children's books and a tired smile that looked like it had survived too many disappointments. She worked for a non-profit that partnered with local shelters, and she had come to organize a daytime reading event for mothers and children. From the first day, she was different. Not loud. Not dramatic. Not the kind of person who tried to impress a room. She noticed things. She noticed when a little boy was too shy to take a book and knelt beside him until he smiled. She noticed when an elderly man could not understand a form and quietly sat with him for 30 minutes. She noticed that Maahir always made everyone laugh but never stayed long after the room emptied. By their third Saturday working together, she brought him a paper cup of coffee without asking. By their fifth, she knew he took it with too much sugar and pretended not to. Saira had her own sadness, though she wore it gracefully. She had moved back to the city after ending an engagement that had slowly turned her into someone smaller. Her former fiancé, Cashin Wolf, was charming in public and cruel in private, the kind of man who made every wound sound like a misunderstanding. He never hit her, and for a long time that made her think she had no right to call it pain. But he corrected her clothes, mocked her job, read her messages, and told her kindness made her weak. When she finally left, people praised her bravery, but bravery did not help much when morning still felt heavy and every compliment sounded suspicious. Maahir learned pieces of this over months, never all at once. Saira never dumped her pain onto him. She released it carefully, like someone handing over broken glass. A sentence after a volunteer shift. A quiet confession while stacking chairs. A tired laugh when someone asked why she never brought anyone to center events. And Maahir listened. Really listened. He did not rush to fix her. He did not tell her she deserved better as if that sentence alone could repair years of being made to feel difficult to love. He just stayed. Sometimes staying was the kindest thing. Their friendship became the bright part of both their weeks. They took morning walks to the bakery after volunteer events. They argued playfully about which muffins were overrated. They helped each other carry boxes, shared umbrellas on rainy afternoons, and sent each other photos of ordinary things that felt funnier because the other person would understand. But neither of them crossed the line. Saira was still healing. Maahir was still afraid. He had convinced himself that wanting more from her would be selfish, that loving her silently was safer than risking the one relationship that made his life feel warm again. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. The Literacy Center was hosting a daytime fundraiser at a public courtyard downtown, with food stalls, book tables, children's performances, and local sponsors. Saira had spent weeks organizing it, and Maahir had taken a day off work to help. The morning began beautifully. Sunlight poured over the courtyard. Children chased bubbles near the fountain. Volunteers pinned bright badges to their shirts. Saira wore a soft green dress under a cream cardigan, her hair loosely tied back, her face glowing with nervous pride. Maahir caught himself staring more than once and had to pretend he was reading the event schedule. By 10 a.m., the courtyard was full. Then Cashin arrived. Maahir knew who he was before Saira said a word. Cashin moved through the crowd with the polished confidence of someone who expected doors to open. He wore a tailored navy suit and a smile that looked expensive but empty. Saira's face changed the moment she saw him. The color drained from her cheeks, and the clipboard in her hands lowered slowly. Cashin approached her like he owned the space between them. He spoke softly, but Maahir was close enough to see Saira's fingers tighten around the clipboard. Cashin had come to embarrass her. Not with shouting. That would have made him look bad. He did it with careful words, with a smile for the people nearby, with comments about how emotional she could be, how impulsive she was, how he hoped this event would not become another unfinished project. Saira stood frozen while the old fear returned to her body. Maahir watched her shrink by inches, and something inside him, something usually covered by jokes, went still and sharp. He stepped beside her and placed a calm hand on the edge of her clipboard. He did not insult Cashin. He did not make a scene. He simply smiled and said that Saira had organized the entire event, that every sponsor, volunteer, and family was there because of her work, and that if Cashin wanted to support the cause, the donation table was beside the fountain. If not, the exit was easier to find than his manners. A few nearby volunteers heard it. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. Cashin's smile cracked. Saira looked at Maahir as if he had just opened a window in a room where she had been suffocating for years. Cashin leaned closer and muttered something Maahir could not hear, but Saira flinched. That was enough. Maahir shifted slightly, placing himself between them without touching either one. Cashin looked around, realized he no longer controlled the scene, and walked away with his pride wounded but his image intact. Saira made it through another 10 minutes before she broke. She handed her clipboard to a volunteer, walked quickly out of the courtyard, and Maahir followed at a careful distance. He found her on the sidewalk, trying to breathe, one hand pressed to her chest. The city moved around her like nothing had happened. He asked if she wanted space, and she shook her head. Then she reached for his sleeve, not dramatically, not romantically, just desperately, like she needed to know something steady was there. That was when he made the joke. Careful, people will think we're dating, and that was when she whispered, I hope they do. For several seconds, neither moved. Maahir's heart was beating so hard he felt almost embarrassed by it. Saira seemed startled by her own honesty, but she did not take it back. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of all the mornings they had spent side by side, all the almost confessions, all the times he had walked her to her car and wished the walk were longer, all the times she had looked at him like she was waiting for him to believe he could be loved too. Maahir finally said her name, softly, and she closed her eyes as if hearing it from him heard in the sweetest way. He told her he was scared. Not of her, but of ruining what they had. He admitted he had feelings for her, real ones, the kind that had made ordinary Saturdays feel like something he wanted to protect. Saira's eyes filled again, but this time the tears were different. She told him she had been scared too, scared that she was confusing safety with love, scared that after Cashin she could no longer trust her own heart. But every week, Maahir had shown her kindness without asking for anything in return, and slowly, her heart had started to believe again. They did not kiss on that sidewalk. It would have been too simple, too sudden, too much like a movie trying to rush what real people need time to understand. Instead, Maahir held out his hand. Saira looked at it, smiled through tears, and placed her hand in his. Together they walked back into the fundraiser, not as a couple officially, not with labels or promises, but with something honest beginning between them in broad daylight. The rest of the event became a blur of small miracles. Saira returned to the courtyard standing taller than before. Maahir stayed close but not possessive, offering quiet support whenever her confidence wavered. When a sponsor praised the event, Saira accepted it without deflecting. When a child handed her a paper flower, she laughed with her whole face. And when Kashan passed by once more from across the street, Saira did not lower her eyes. She simply kept arranging books on the table while Maahir stood beside her, and for the first time, Kashan looked powerless. Over the next weeks, Maahir and Saira learned how to move slowly. Their first date was not at night under dramatic lights, but on a Sunday morning at a botanical garden where sunlight rested on the leaves and families wandered between flower beds. Saira told him she wanted love that felt peaceful, not like a test she had to keep passing. Maahir told her he did not always know how to be vulnerable without making a joke. She smiled and said she liked his jokes, but she wanted the truth too. So he gave it to her piece by piece. He told her about his father leaving, about his mother's tired hands, about how being needed felt safer than being loved. Saira listened the way he had once listened to her, without rushing, without judging. Their relationship was not perfect. Healing never is. Some days Saira pulled away when Maahir complimented her, because part of her still expected praise to become control. Some days Maahir hid his fear behind humor until Saira gently asked what he was really feeling. They had misunderstandings. They had quiet car rides. They had moments when the past knocked on the door and demanded to be let back in. But this time, neither of them faced it alone. Kindness did not erase their scars, but it taught them how to stop being ashamed of them. One afternoon, almost a year after the fundraiser, the Literacy Center held another daytime event in the same courtyard. The sky was clear. The fountain sparkled. Children sat cross-legged on colorful mats while volunteers read stories aloud. Saira stood at the registration table, confident and radiant in a yellow blouse, directing people with the calm warmth that had always been inside her, now no longer buried beneath someone else's cruelty. Maahir watched from a distance, carrying 2 cups of overly sweet coffee, and felt a quiet ache of gratitude. She saw him looking and walked over. A little girl from the reading group ran past them and asked if they were married. Saira laughed, and Maahir, unable to resist, lifted an eyebrow and said, "Careful, people will think we're dating." This time Saira did not whisper. She took the coffee from his hand, looked straight at him in the golden daylight, and said, "Good. I hope they know." Before the ending, please comment "I still believe in second chances" if this story reminded you that love can return gently after pain. Months later, Maahir proposed in that same courtyard, not at night, not in front of a giant crowd, but on a sunny morning after the children's reading hour, surrounded by books, paper flowers, and the people who had watched them become brave. He told Saira he did not love her because she had been broken. He loved her because she had survived without letting the world steal her tenderness. Saira cried, laughed, and said yes before he even finished asking. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Your support helps stories about kindness, healing, and second chances reach more people who may need hope today. And years later, whenever someone asked how their love story began, Saira always smiled first. Maahir would say it began with a joke, because that was easier. But Saira would take his hand and tell the truth. It began on a bright morning when she was scared, when the past tried to make her small again, and when one kind man stood beside her without asking for anything. It began when he warned her people might think they were dating, and she finally found the courage to say she hoped they would. Because sometimes love does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrives like sunlight, quietly touching the places we thought would never feel warm again.